Great, welcome back to Senate Education. We're looking at S-167, which is in our folders. This is the miscellaneous education bill. In addition to our work on literacy and likely something on cell phone use and CTEs and libraries, we do hope to move a miscellaneous education bill that will include a number of things, and I've asked Ms. St. James just to bring us back to where we are with it, and so senators will know, and it'll be the last thing that we usually move. I did have an exchange with the House Chair of Education, and I think the request is going through the various powers in the House and Senate that we would like a House miscellaneous education bill from them in case we need to add anything after crossover. And I don't know if it was met with enthusiasm, but I'm sure after the pro tem speaker have a conversation, I'm sure it'll all get worked out. So S-167, if you would take us through this, some of it's a reminder, and then there's some new language.
Yes, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I think almost all of this is new language, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you should have draft 2.1 of the committee strike all amendment to S-167. S-167 is introduced it started as a miscellaneous bill, I believe, put forward by the agency. And I'm just pulling it up, that's introduced. Section 1 of the bill in draft 2.1 is an amendment to the same section as the bill is introduced, section 559 in Title 16, which is in the school district chapter on public bids for construction. But the language that you have in draft 2.1 is different than what was in the bill as introduced. I think AOB came back to you and mentioned that the language that was introduced was perhaps not what they were intending to change. And this language in section 1 of draft 2.1 reflects AOB's request for this new section. So high cost construction contracts. So currently when a school construction contract exceeds $500,000, there has to be certain things regarding bidding. Certain conditions met regarding bidding. And so this change would change that threshold from $500,000 up to $2 million. And that's when those bidding requirements would kick in. If you go to page 2, line 14, the other substantive change to this section is that current law requires, if you look at line 14, a contract for any such item or service to be obtained pursuant to subsection A of this section shall be awarded to one of the 3 lowest responsible bids. That's what current law is. This language would change it to contemplate that there could be less than 3 bids that they can pick from. And the reason behind that change, you would have to ask AOB about that. But those are the 2 substantive changes for the section.
Okay.
The second section on page 3 is very similar to the bill as introduced, but there were some changes that needed to happen. So So the one change is that there was a school, I believe it's the Vermont College of Fine Arts, still in existence.
Right, thank you. So that's still there?
Yes.
Yep.
So in the original bill, that was struck.
Right, thank you.
And so in this bill on page 3, line 20 to 21, Vermont College of Fine Arts is still active. And then Vermont Law and Graduate School, current law reads Vermont Law School, and they have changed their name to the Vermont Law and Graduate School. So that change was made there. And that's the only change to section 2 there.
So, and just, so these are the colleges that are closed, and this just brings, this kind of tidies up that section of. 60.
Yes, there's for post-secondary schools located in Vermont, there's kind of two ways you can go about being allowed to operate here. One of them is through a state board process, and the other one is if you are accredited and meet the criteria for exempt status, and this is a list of those schools. And then section 3 is new. So again, this was a request by AOE.
So I
Section,
have two section 3s. So you're not full cost education, should that be section 4? Or am I misreading?
oh yeah, it should be, no, it should be section 4, yep, that's
Okay.
either myself or the editors picked up on that, so I will change that. So I'm on page 4, section 3.
Yep.
Is an amendment to the effective date of a piece of legislation that you all did last year, which is the, just had it up, change that. It is, I believe it's to the emergency plan. Let me. Nope. Yes, so currently the emergency operations plan requirement that you all put into law last year is slated to take effect on July 1, 2024. The requirement that each SU have a all hazards emergency operation plan. And so AOE is proposing, and draft 2.1 makes that change, that section would not take effect until July 1, 2025. And so we do that by amending the effective date of the bill that passed the legislation.
What page are you?
4,
What line are you on?
6, and 7.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And then section 4 on, we're still on page 4, is another request by AOE. And that is an amendment to the, to section 1262A, which is in the school food programs subchapter. It's in the transportation and board chapter. And so this section talks about money for programs to expand their school food programs or get up and running if they don't already have one. And so current law is that these grants are available to SUs looking to meet the cost of initiating or expanding a school food program. And so this proposed change on page 4, lines 18 through 20, would also allow nonprofit organizations that sponsor the child and adult care food program within licensed child care centers, Head Start programs, after school programs, and adult daycare programs to also qualify for these grants to get up and running or expand. So that's the substantive change there. And then on page 5, this should be section 5, Holocaust education. This is a more thorough version of the language you all looked at, I think last week, requiring AOE to request from all SUs a report containing information regarding whether and where Holocaust education is taught in the pre-K through grade 12 supervisory union-wide curriculum. And they have to include Holocaust education resources in that request. And then SUs would be required to report back to AOE with that information on a report December 31st. And then before March of next year, AOE has to submit a written report to you all. I'm on page 6 now, with the information organized by SU regarding the inclusion of Holocaust education and curriculum across the state. And then additionally, the report needs to include an explanation of how curricula are developed, including an analysis of how Holocaust education fits into the standards for student performance adopted by the State Board of Education. I threw that last line in there to try and get you some tie to what you're looking at. But we can certainly, you know, fluff that up to be more robust. Trying to tie it to the standards that the State Board. The curriculum have to be developed to the standards, so if you were just getting a report back of who's offering it and who's not, that may not help you understand how it ties in with the rest of the law. So.
Senator Rashid.
Thank you. I think just to repeat a point that I think Senator Williams, I think you brought this up last time, but were we interested in including genocide studies in general in this, or keeping it exclusive to Holocaust education? Is that part of the conversation last time?
We had testimony on that.
Yeah.
From Bellows, Hamilton,
That's right, good memory.
that, and I got a number of emails basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So we know that, that is part of Act One. So this gets at something else that people are asking about, specifically about Holocaust education, since I believe, and she's coming in for some other things we can always loop back to her, Amanda Garces said that genocide education is included in. So this gets at something else. And I would say the other couple things that I'm thinking about, homeschooling. Tidy that up, put something there, and I'd also say, I don't remember the virtual learning, how complicated it is, but that might be something we could do. In this, and I know the big witnesses will be AOE and the V's, and this copy will be the last thing to leave. Yes,
One more thing, so regarding the homeschooling thing.
Yeah.
Totally my fault, I didn't respond to a email in a timely manner from Beth, but we do have language for the homeschool piece.
unbelievable.
And so I.
Beautiful.
So,
That is great, actually.
so we could do that. And so I sent that email a few minutes ago, but
Great.
so there's the copy of it that we could get printed and we could discuss. There's also a second piece, which I'm sure will take up more conversation, but has to do with, and I apologize, I don't have my notes in front of me, but it has to do with the application and licensure process regarding approved independent schools and what happens or doesn't happen when approval is denied because the requirements aren't being met. My understanding is there's this limbo state in which an approved independent school may exist in indefinitely unless exist indefinitely, even if they haven't met the requirements. And so it's closing that, but giving them a certain length of time to remedy the issue. I think 6 months at least. Right. So that would,
Do you want me to share this?
that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
And somewhat related to this, and we'll have the agency in, I believe they just, has anybody seen the letter that they just issued to the independent schools? I haven't, St. John's Fair Academy's received it. It's the one that requires attestation and anti-discrimination and special ed by April 15th, but I don't think that overlaps with what you're saying.
No,
No, that's a different issue.
Okay.
We got briefing.
Okay, okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, just a question on the genocide,
Yeah.
section 5. The whether and where, is that enough? We need whether, where, and like scope, like something to understand what it is they're teaching. Yeah, the
Word. Information. Okay, so what are you thinking that you would add?
the scope, like what are they teaching? You know, kind of like a syllabus, just an outline, just something. Otherwise, it's, yes, they do it, and that's it, school X, yes, they do it, no, they don't. That's-
I think that's on the second, or page
The
6.
second one sounds like it's more about the Vermont Holocaust Memorial, you know, that just recognizing that their resources are also
No,
available.
I'm looking at page 6. It says, report shall include an explanation of how curricula are developed, including an analysis of how Holocaust education fits into the standards student performance, but I don't know if that sufficiently gets to your question, but.
Okay, yeah, so I thought, I read this as like a couple step process. First, the SUs provide feedback, and then the agency summarizes that. So it's all about what you ask me SUs. Anyway, that's my hit.
You said section 5?
Section,
It's 5 now.
Section 4.
It says section 3, if I read it. It's
page 5.
5. Somebody.
Page 5 of 6.
There's a message, yeah, she knows. Okay.
How do you feel about that now with that, looking at, do you still,
But,
or yes,
you know, It's clear, everybody, it's clear.
Okay. Senator Lewis.
I have a multitude of questions.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the first one, which is, does the AOE have the capacity to generate this kind of study done?
Well, we haven't heard from them,
Okay.
but,
Okay.
so,
Second one.
but it should, I mean, it is a little bit more complicated than an email, for sure. But for one, I'd like to be responsive to what I'd say has been the overwhelming concern by a number of people in and out of the Jewish community around this issue, and would give us some data. Okay.
Great. Second one is around the public bids. Can we possibly get someone like, I'm thinking like Matt Westgraves from AGP to come in and tell us what the current, or someone from the AOE, I don't know, what the current criteria is and how this differs
Sure, definitely. That's with,
AGC?
great.
And then my second question, my third question.
So that's
is-
section one.
My third question is section 4. So the nonprofit organizations that would be eligible for these grants, is this coming out of the ed fund? Where's this money from?
Let me look at, pull up the whole statute.
Thank you.
Or-
Just very sensitive about the ed fund right now. Seems like it's a little stretched.
So can I go back to something now, sir?
One second, I just want to get this answer, just because I don't want to lose. This thought.
It's not specific in the statute. I can go back and look at, I can trace the money back. I don't think this is coming out of the ed fund,
Okay,
but I will confirm.
thank you. That'd be really helpful.
Be great. Do you have another one?
I think that's it.
Okay, Senator Williams.
Your comment, you said you just received some language about, what was that?
Homeschooling.
Which one, the homeschooling or this, the?
Homeschool.
Yes, that was, so you remember the conversation we had about the hearing after homeschooling is started? You know what I'm talking about? And that's, one step that we could take to address was the general issue that was raised from one of my constituents regarding some kids who started going through homeschool, but were essentially neglected, weren't getting an education. And there were a lot of other issues going on, but there was also just no learning, it was just video games all day. And so, instead of just putting back in everything that we took out last year, if somebody has, I believe it was substantial, I think the language said that you need substantial evidence to show that the requirements aren't being met. I'd have to double check, but then you can have a hearing to determine whether or not homeschooling is appropriate, so.
Didn't we take that out last year?
Yeah, we made a number of different,
Because I got called by a couple of my parents in my district that were homeschoolers and said, why are we doing this? We're
right.
not gonna check on us.
So that's the problem.
So we'll schedule this for next week and let's keep this as is and bring in orphan language on your homeschooling.
Yep.
I might do virtual learning and you have independent schools.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And I'll invite Matt Musgrave in / in the AOE and the Bs. I'll give this to you. Oh, you found Matt?
I did.
Beautiful. Great. In fact, you were gonna get back to us just on whether or not the funds would come from the ed fund.
Yes, I'm trying to trace it now through last year's budget, but I'm not having luck, so I will get back to you.
Okay, we'll set this aside and move on then to S204 and S303 kind of together. It's all right with you, Senator Hewlett. I'm gonna start with 303
Sure.
around, Beth, can you help us with the imagination library idea and concept a little bit? So we have 3.1 of Senator Hewlett's bill, and we have Oh, we have 2.1 also. And we have
3.1 is the one we should be.
beautiful. So we'll do that in a minute. Right now, I'd like to look at 3.1 of 303.
Yep.
And take us through, if you would, some of the changes, as well as we can talk about the, Imagination Library. One of the things I'm hearing about 303, and I respect it, but completely agree with it, and I think you may already have it in here, I haven't looked. But we need to give people something, so the modules are one thing, but we might have somebody enrolled in a master's class, or they might just take a UVM class for 3 credits on literacy or something somewhere. How can we make sure that everybody wins, you know, if the modules don't work for you, if you want to do it in person, you get a class, is there that kind of language in this?
Yes.
That's one of the big things that I've heard from.
Yes,
Okay.
so, if you look at page, we're on draft, that's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel, we're on draft 3.1 of S 303. If you look at page, so on page 1, we're starting with adding a new section to Title 16. And subsection A is the definition of professionally licensed, which I'm just flagging is still a policy choice for you all,
Yeah.
right? If you go to page 2, subsection B starts with the first language requiring someone to do something. And it requires all professionally licensed Vermont educators employed in a Vermont public or approved independent. That yellow highlighting reflects language added since the last draft we looked
Can I
at.
interrupt?
Yeah.
301 or?
We're looking at 301,
So what's
draft
Or
3.1.
we have also our package 201,
So that, this is,
303.
let's see.
Draft number 3.
all
So
marked up.
this one we don't need anymore.
No, I was just.
You just added, that can be tossed, so we just want 3.3.
So,
So we're on page 2, subsection B, so lines 1 through 5.
Yep,
So we're requiring all professionally licensed Vermont educators employed in a Vermont public or approved independent school to complete a professional learning on evidence-based literacy instruction. And then line 4 is where we're going here. Developed and offered or approved by AOE. And so that or approved by was meant to allow AOE, allow an educator to take the program that was developed and offered by AOE or another program that is approved by AOE. I think you all had a discussion about
yeah,
what does that approval process look like and the criteria, et cetera. This bill does not contemplate that, but it does have the option of the evidence-based literacy instruction has to be developed and offered or approved by AOE.
do we need to contemplate the process? I mean,
I think that's a policy choice for you all.
Senator Hewlett.
I mean, I think you do. My question is, will they have like a list of approved programs, or is this something that will be flagged in like the endorsement process, which could be looked at one individual, you know, like on an individual basis? And I'm not sure what the answer is to that question, but.
But it's interesting because I could see, so the only reason I'm concerned about making a list is to see somebody going to UVM.
No.
But you could also see somebody going to the University of California, Berkeley online for 3 credits. And so then I guess to your point, that what you're looking for is something that the policy is to be approved by the Agency of Education, and the policy or the class has to contain X, Y, and Z. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, if it's flagged at the endorsement level, then, you know, when you go to like re-up your endorsement, if there's a whole process and it's all online, and someone, I assume, at the standards board is looking through everything that you've done, and they sort of check it off.
Yeah,
And then, so maybe that's where this would happen, which seems to make sense, because then you wouldn't need a list. Because yeah, what if they went to the University of Copenhagen? that may not be on the list. but
Right,
It
right,
might be
right.
fine for the endorsement.
So how often are people upping their endorsements?
Is it every 5 years?
I don't know, but this bill contemplates kind of two chunks of time here. One would be if you're currently licensed when the bill passes, you gotta do it by July 1, 2026. And then the other would be every time you are newly licensed, it's within your first 2 years of licensing. So there's really only one time period when we would be talking about a renewal potentially.
Right.
And that's not even a whole renewal cycle, right? Because it's January 1, 2026. So that to me, that's a process question for AOE and the standards board on how they would look at that. You could certainly build in language that says something like evidence-based literacy instruction developed and offered or approved by AOE. If, evidence-based literacy instruction approved by AOE shall be substantially similar to the program developed and offered by AOE, right? So that there's some tie-in. So you could add language to make the two developed and approved pieces similar, but the process would be an operations question
Mhm.
for the folks looking at this documentation.
Yeah, can we have AOE speak to this, because I don't know,
Yeah,
they,
yeah, we can have AOE talk to it, but then. I do like what you're saying, though, in terms of tying it to, there's some sort of standards there. So if you are gonna go to the University of California, Berkeley, people are gonna say, well, as long as the University of California, Berkeley reflects, as you said it,
Yeah, substantially similar. There's,
and then we can talk about the process.
yeah, okay.
yeah, because I'm just curious how, it says everyone honored for the state is gonna have this, well, who's gonna check up on that? How's it gonna be reviewed? I'm just.
So they have to, oh, okay, so if you look at E on line 16, educators shall provide evidence of completion of literacy instruction and professional learning required under the section upon the educator's next license renewal. So again, that's the operational piece of how is that gonna be built into the licensing platform for submission of proof? What does it look like? What does that proof look like? What's the process if someone completed it on January 1, 2028? Because their licenses, their renewal is not due till then, is there does that, is there a penalty for that? Those would all be operations pieces to ask the standards for it.
Yeah.
Right, so January 1, 2026. What I'm imagining is everyone has either done the modules, taken a class, or gotten something else approved. And are you wondering, Senator Doolittle, what that kind of paperwork looks like? Is that like a reasonable time frame? Because I'm thinking, again, I'm just.
Because your next license renewal might be way beyond 2026.
Correct.
Right.
Like I have a 10-year retired teacher's license right now. That means I wouldn't have to do this for 10 years.
Which is concerning,
I know.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
but that's why I'm saying it's January 1, 2026, right? That's what we're,
But they don't have to provide evidence until their next.
So that would be a question for AOE, like an operation, so
I
Yeah.
like, for what it's worth, everybody showing everything and being done by 2026 or 20,
I think that would be a major operations question for
Okay.
AOE on how, if they have.
How they would shut that down. Okay. And I don't know, check it out, I guess, but even if, let's say we. Yeah. They could get all these now, in a way, if all of a sudden everybody and their brothers at home watching these videos, they could be getting. Like, hey, I just finished the video, like
Yeah,
something happening,
So,
right?
maybe, depends on what's required right now. So usually if it's a license when you renew your license,
Mhm.
like when a nurse renews their license, it's a it's a platform, a licensing system, right?
Okay.
And so the system is built up. There's a whole bunch of code for people who are a lot smarter than me. And it's a workflow that's triggered on certain dates. And if you check this, then you move on to this. If you don't check this, then you get this. And so I would imagine that there's something similar for teacher license renewals.
Okay.
That's not to say that they can't take information in on an off-cycle process. But their ability to do that, I think, would be a major operational question for them. You know. Yes, I think sitting here in this room, it's easy for us to think, well, all they have to do is send in a piece of
I
paper,
know,
but the licensing. Division may not be set up to handle that paper.
Yeah.
There may be no paper licensing files.
Yeah.
And so then who's the person who's scanning that into each, so questions, operations.
right. But other than that. Okay, so we will have them in to wrap this up and we'll,
Well, we still have some, you still have some policy decisions to make, right? Professionally licensed, you
Yeah.
like that,
I like that. I
That
felt good about
definition?
it last week.
but that would not include provisional licenses, right?
Because provisional licenses could go on for how many years, we said?
First issued for 2 years, and then there would be 1 extra year for emergencies.
I'm fine with professionally licensed for what it's worth. I just. Okay with it.
Yeah, we added professionally. Because it,
That word was not included originally but I put it in this time after the discussion, but it was still a flag for you all to decide on whether or not. you wanted
It
to
seems
do
like
that.
the majority's
Okay.
feeling okay about it.
Then,
And then if anybody else flags it later on.
then I'm gonna mark that as a decision point made.
Yeah. I mean, I'm inclined to do the public and approved independent, but I think we need to hear from some people on that. And then,
And then the only other term would be the term educator, because that includes administrators.
right,
We got like contradictory responses on that one.
we did, I left feeling, again, if you're in the classroom, and you're monitoring a teacher. Well, you have people watching you who don't speak French.
Right.
We have people in classrooms, principal may monitor that doesn't,
No calculus.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they understand. Can identify good teaching. So, yeah, I could go either way. I mean, I like it that everybody would buy into this, but given the incredible load that principals have also. And if they're not in the classroom teaching it, I'm kind of okay with them not sitting through 46 hours, for taking a 3-credit class at UVM that their district may or may not pay for. Yeah.
I'm wondering if we could see this as like an iterative process and do, teachers first.
Yeah,
And then if we find in a few years there's great success and teachers want administrators to have it, or administrators are feeling like they need it, then someone could do another bill that.
great. I love that. So we'll hold off on
Them.
administrators now.
So
So
we're
we
gonna-
should have it. Go ahead.
We're gonna change the term educator to teacher,
Yes,
which means, I just wanna read this definition.
please.
So an individual licensed under this chapter, which is the chapter we're working in, chapter 51. The majority of whose employed time in a public school district or supervisory union is assigned to furnish to students direct instructional or other educational services. As defined by rule of the standards board, or who is otherwise subject to licensing as determined by the standards board. Okay, great, teacher.
I have one last question
Please.
though. Cause it was brought up when we heard testimony that, a K3 training might be different from like a 10, 11, 12 training. Do we wanna dive into that?
Are you so you're talking specifically about the modules versus the class, that training?
Yeah, any kind of reading prep. Do we want it to be the same for everyone K through 12, or should it be differentiated?
Well, I think we would need to hear from the agency and some experts around whether or not the modules. I don't know the modules well enough, and we can have Ms. Leshin to say if they would meet. the need of K-3 as well as an 8 through 12 teacher.
Right.
So yeah, let's have her in and ask her that.
I will just point out when you're taking that testimony, you know, this legislation requires professionally licensed teachers who are working in a public or approved independent school to complete a program developed and offered or approved. There's nothing in that, this is policy.
Yep.
How many hours, right? So we've all been talking about the
46
Act 28,
yeah.
45-hour literacy module. Is what's contemplated here that everyone is completing 45 hours? Is it that they are doing the section that's devoted to their, and I think that I think what AOE is going to be doing, and there was some language here that we took out, because jurisdictionally it was a little weird, but I think what AOE is going to be doing is proposing to the standards board for each endorsement, what do those continuing education requirements look like? But this isn't super clear to me when that proposal will be happening.
Okay.
And so if you're requiring everyone to complete something by January 1, 2026, is this legislation clear enough on what everyone should be?
Right.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I prefer vague than being specific, because I do think all of a sudden, if the Stern Center offered a course tomorrow that the Agency of Education, it met the description that we're saying here. I don't want somebody to spend 46 hours if they can do it in 20, or a 3-credit class is a heck of a lot more. So I'm just sort of talking aloud. I'm not, yeah. So for me, keeping it general and having the Agency of Education sign off on it, given the guidelines that we're going to include, makes sense to me. But that's,
Policy piece
Yeah.
I wanted to raise.
is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good. 3-credit course is 45 hours, right?
It has to be, or if not, 3-credit class, 3 times a week, an hour.
15 hours
Oh,
per credit. I always
I
thought.
left school a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was happy to be out of it.
Yeah. Okay, great, okay. How does that instruction feel? A little bit that we've given you, and then we'll hear some.
We're making the change to teachers. We're keeping public and approved independent. I'm gonna add some substantially similar language. I think that's it for this section.
Great, and then we'll have some people in.
Yep.
We'll have AOE in, to talk about, they have the ability to collect this information. We'll talk about some licensing timing. We'll have Ms. Lesh talk about if somebody does use the modules, are they really able to accommodate K through 12, 9 through 12? Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. The Imagination Library.
Could we,
Oh, please.
I just wanna point out one change before we get there. So section 4
Mhm.
added the state librarian to the advisory council on literacy. Page 5, line 7.
Yeah, I think everybody was
That's it.
pretty psyched when that happened, so.
Okay.
And for there.
I was just saying 135 hours.
For 3-credit class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's 3-credit class. I don't know. So options is what I want to be able to give people. And I hate to see them get locked into modules if they really are in graduate school trying to get additional credits, saying, oh, you can't get graduate credit then. So I like the flexibility. So the Imagination Library. Do you have any idea where the $100,000 came from?
Oh, no,
So you were just said somebody's, oh, that's right, because you didn't draft this.
I did not,
Right.
but I don't know. the
I've
genesis
asked-
of that.
I've asked Julia Richter sent her a message last week saying, I would love to get a sense of what this costs. I think what I'm trying to get my head around is what is what are we really doing here in terms of administration? How many, is there gonna be an office? That sort of thing. How is this, what is this creating?
So this language, and I watched the testimony that you all had last week.
Yeah.
And I think it was it didn't seem to cover any of the
It
mechanics.
did, it just, it's great, we,
Well, and I say that as a caveat to, I can tell you what this bill does.
yeah,
And Tucker has shared some resources with me that he has been given in the
Uh-huh.
bill drafting process, but they are not resources that Tucker or I put together. So it would. The Dolly Parton Imagination Library has lots of resources about the mechanics of this program, and so I can speak to what my understanding is, but that might be the technical administration piece that you need to hear from them on what they expect from their partner organization. But this bill.
so that's a great point, so clearly Ms. Briggs, when she testified, she probably hadn't seen this.
I don't know.
I know, I'll check with her to see if she's seen this, if she was involved in it. What will this do?
Yep, so this requires AOE, so on page 8. We're in section 6 of the bill, and I'm starting around line 18 at the very bottom of page 8. So it requires AOE to coordinate with the Imagination Library to ensure statewide access to the program. To manage, I'm on page 9 now, to manage the daily operations of the program and provide oversight of the special fund, which would be the state matching money. Including establishing library-based programs in each county, communicating with and coordinating any volunteers at local and school libraries, and advancing and strengthening the program to ensure enrollment growth. It requires AOE to develop, promote, coordinate a public awareness program for donors, because the special fund contemplates that there would be some fundraising involved, or at least receipt of
Yeah.
donations.
Yeah.
It requires AOE to develop and promote a public awareness program for children just to register. And then AOE would be authorized to retain up to 5% of the funds for administrative costs. And then there's the creation of the special fund itself. There's a reporting requirement to you all about the number of children enrolled, the growth of the program, any feedback. There's the special, and then AOE would be administering the special fund. That $100,000 appropriation would be the Kickstarter into the special fund.
Okay.
This is drafted as a pilot program with an automatic sunset in 3 years on July 1, 2027. I am not sure that the way this is drafted is going to the Dolly Parton Imagination Library folks. I'm not sure whether they like this or not.
Okay,
I don't think I think that they want to see a 501c3 created.
right,
Would we be better off to ask the agency of libraries? Because this really falls right into what they do. A lot of them are already doing.
right, and I think they have some concerns about it.
Or it doesn't.
I mean,
Yeah.
they might be able to put some additional people on. But it sounded to me like, Ms. Briggs was talking about, they basically run a lot of,
Right.
So,
So, yeah, so the Agency of Education definitely has this, there'd be a lot of infrastructure here. There's creating fundraisers, all sorts of folks. We know it's happening in a lot of counties. We don't know, I can't imagine you know how many counties, right?
It might be in some of the materials. Let's see.
Yeah, Senator Hewitt.
what would be the negative to just keeping it on a county basis?
And see which, well, this is what if, for example, it's in 10 counties, how do we get the other 4 up and going? You know, that's what we would like to do.
There are 16 local programs in the state, but
Okay.
it's not specific to county.
Okay,
There are 6,383 children enrolled,
that is great.
but there's 29,168 eligible.
Okay,
And this is information that Tucker shared with me that I think he had access to during the drafting process.
Okay,
And this is information from the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. This is not information that I have vetted in any way. And these numbers appear to be from 2021 census data.
is the state in the business of creating 501c3s?
I don't know that I can speak to that in a general term.
okay.
You could, right?
Right,
You could, you could, I've very quickly before today looked
Yeah.
at some other states and some of what their enabling legislation looks like. They all reference a 501c3. But there's kind of broader language such as either the state agency that's tasked with running the program creates a 501c3 or they partner with a 501c3. I think that if you just give AOE or the Department of Libraries the responsibility of contracting with a 501c3, that's gonna raise bidding issues for them, and that, that's not my area of expertise. You would want to hear from them on that. But yes, I don't think this is a legal issue. I think this is a policy issue.
right, and I think it would be a massive lift for the agency at a time where you don't have, and I'm not sure actually if they have the interest either in doing it. Would love to find a solution where we could, I don't want to force anybody to do it, but encourage the communities that aren't doing it to do it, because it does seem like a great thing if they want to do it.
You could certainly create a special fund.
Right.
And then there's like a grant program run through
Yeah,
AOE,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then
yeah.
every local community. So I believe that the Imagination Library requires partnerships to be through certain entities. They could, and if it's on a statewide level, that's a different requirement than if it's on an individual community level. So I'd have to look into what those individual community level requirements are.
Sarah,
I have the utmost respect for Senator Starr and for Dolly Parton. Love them both dearly. So this is kudos to them for putting this together. I'm thinking in
I don't know if
terms.
Dolly's fingerprints are on this, but.
Dolly, I'm thinking in terms of being fiscally responsible and in terms of capacity to do stuff right now. And I'm thinking also about what our state librarian said when she was in here a few weeks ago, which it keeps showing up in my thinking when I'm looking at this, and we were talking about literacy, and she said, just putting a book in a kid's hand actually, although it's wonderful, isn't really enough to build literacy. And she was talking about how parents have to, or caregivers have to engage with their child, speak to them, read to them, use, voice alterations as they're reading, and there's like touch involved, and there's this whole sort of ecosystem that's built around literacy. And so as much as I love this idea, and I was a poor kid who had a lot of books at my disposal, which was great, but I'm wondering if our money is better spent, our money and our time and our resources are better spent, like building up our library programs and getting more kids into libraries where there are programs that actually teach parents how to teach kids how to read, so I'd love to hear from Catherine about that and maybe
Right.
also the AOE, but that's kind of where, in terms of trying to be the fiscally conservative one in the room, I just wonder, this is gonna cost a lot in terms of not just money, but time, staffing, resources, and over the long haul. Is it always gonna be around? Is the program always gonna be around? And I don't know, I have a lot of questions, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think, I respect your questions. I think we all have similar ones around setting something up, big thing. What I'd like you to kind of look into, is there a way for us to create something? What would it cost? What kind of effort would it entail? So I'd love to give legislators something, always do, colleagues, friends. Is there anything we can take out of this that might work in some way? I think one of the things, and I'm remembering testimony a little bit differently than you, Senator, if you like, is to have that experience, you've got to at least get the book. You know, that feeling the book, experiencing the book,
The first part.
gotta get the book. And not everybody does go to the libraries. Sometimes there's something cool about getting it at home. We did something in Bennington where kids had to go and buy the book. They got free book at the bookstore because we wanted them to go into the bookstore and kind of purchase it. So there is something about that. I'm not ready to put I'm not saying that you are, but a nail in it yet, but I'd be interested in this idea of a fund and some understanding what are the other communities doing in terms of setup, and maybe Cheryl Hooker could be helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to, I'll have to reach out to, I think, the Imagination Library themselves to talk
Yeah.
about this, because there's,
But a statewide office, which I think could, and I didn't quite understand what Ted was talking about until you just took us through that again. Could be as many as 3 positions. clearly,
yeah, I'm looking at
Huge cost.
some of the, again, materials put forward by the Imagination Library, and they are suggesting at least 2 full-time positions. I can reach out to the Imagination Library and talk about this. I think on a statewide level, my understanding is it's a no-go unless there's a partnered nonprofit, as well as not a pilot project. So, I don't wanna get in a position where I'm negotiating with the Imagination Library on that, but I
Yeah.
can certainly ask if, there are other state examples that have maybe set up, just a fund for local communities to use, and then the local community would still. I don't know if there are restrictions on how those funds, those matching local funds are, generated. Right, like, I don't know if it's fundraising
Right.
or, you know, from the local community. A state fund, you know, may not work, so I can.
I'd
find
love
out
to
what
do
those-
some exploration and see. I mean, how many books did you say are going out right now? 6,000?
Yes, just over 6,000.
That is pretty amazing.
6,389. It's possible that after I reach out and talk to someone, assuming I'm able to get in touch with
Yeah.
Ms. Briggs, that my recommendation to you all is that you hear directly from
Sure.
them on what the requirements would be, depending on the different levels
Yeah.
that you're looking at
I
working
think
at.
keeping it local, honestly, is probably maybe the best way to go, in some ways. Yeah, Senator.
Yeah, I think I got caught up on the conversation earlier of the state starting a nonprofit in order to administer this. I don't know, I feel like there could be challenges there, if not, it being impossible. Are there any statewide nonprofits that could be a good partner in this that you know of?
What about like Cliff?
I
Cliff is,
believe that
Really good question.
I believe that the nonprofit would have to be established solely for the imagination
I see.
yeah, Cliff.
on a statewide level.
There's 3 components to this. There's the education. There's also the library component, and the fiscal.
Yeah.
So I would ask Miss Catherine.
Yeah, Del Neo, yeah.
Donnell,
Yeah.
if she has any ideas about whether she would consider taking it on. Can we get joint fiscal to look at it?
We did, so we asked them,
Okay,
they're just behind us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sent them a message last
Yeah.
week, as a follow-up to some other things.
and the education agency will benefit from this if we craft it in that,
Yeah.
design.
No, your question about would a library be the initiator of a local one is a really good one. And maybe that's happened, that may, I don't know.
What
if-
parents go to the library with their children when they go to school? They go for a ball game or, so, yeah.
Cliff is the Children's Literacy Foundation, just FYI.
Two Fs or one?
It's a CLIF.
Okay.
And I know there's some around here.
I was just thinking, given the momentum of this project nationwide, wondering what the benefit is, like pushing through a statewide system really is. It's already got its own momentum. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, so if this kind of doesn't pan out as a state supported bill, you know, it's still gonna survive. And maybe that's enough, but again, I don't really understand again the cost impact, but just one random thought.
So you don't want to, so would you propose, for example, if Beth were to come back and has conversations with Ms. Briggs and others that say, hey, you know, this fund would be really cool if you guys would start it. You don't want to completely abandon the idea that maybe we do get to the point where it's statewide and maybe we have the agency look at what would that actually look like if we're moving forward down the road. Maybe
So-
something like that, yeah. Okay.
I know, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for doing it, and I'm happy to talk to her as well, whatever works, but I'd love it if you talk to her first.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
just take 2 minutes, is that okay, everybody? Okay, and then we'll come back and do 2:04. And then we've got 4 o'clock, you've got, is he coming in first?
No, probably